Hey y'all, welcome to Adventures with Aggie, brought to you by Coco's Coffee House. Hopefully you tuned in on Friday. We were giving away free Coco's coffee on our Instagram page. If you missed it, go check them out. They're on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village. Today we're starting part 2 of Adventures with Aggie's Road to Tokyo. We're featuring McKenna Geer. She's a Paralympic shooter. She won bronze medal in 2016, and she's going to tell us what this sport is. I didn't know very much about shooting before listening to McKenna tell me all about it. And she's going to tell us how the sport works and what she's been training for and how it's going so far, as well as what she's been up to the last year. So please welcome McKenna. McKenna, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me on today.
Of course, I'm so excited to get to know more about you and your story. But I guess just to get started, can you kind of give me some background on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from an hour north of Seattle, Washington, and I was born with my disability. It's called arthrogryposis. I'll say a little bit of a mouthful, but yeah, it basically means that when I was born without all of the muscle in my major muscle groups, and had like contractures in some of my joints. Affects daily life a little bit, but my parents never wanted to let my disability hold me back. So they really pushed me to learn and figure out different ways of doing things all the time. And sport was a huge part of that. When I was 5, I started, uh, you know, going to summer camps for kids with disabilities, meeting people in the community that had disabilities, meeting Paralympians and Air Force veterans and people that ended up changing my life. And I think that's been, really amazing.
Definitely, definitely. That's really cool though that you just kind of grabbed it by the horns, like we're gonna do this anyway. Because I think some people, at least that I've spoken to, they kind of have the ups and downs and things. But I think that's really cool that you just took it and ran with it. And here we are, and you've done amazing things in the sports world so far. I can't wait to see what else you have in store because I'm rooting for you. Hopefully, lots of exciting things happen this year. But I guess let's kind of backtrack just a little bit. And can you tell me, like, how did you start shooting? Like how did this begin? I'm not sure if I don't know how I would start this. So very curious to see how this became your sport.
So the summer camp that I had mentioned starting when I was 5, it was a 3-day day camp for kids with disabilities. And the director of that camp, the guy who got it started, was a disabled Air Force veteran, and his name was Ernie. And Ernie wanted to adapt the outdoors for us. Anything and everything that he could think of was brought out, was adapted, and we were taught something new every day. He created a wheelchair obstacle course so those of us who used wheelchairs could learn to navigate on different terrains and go up curbs. He rented sailboats and kayaks and had a guy that lived on this lake where the camp was hosted bring his boat and his inner tube out, so we got to go inner tubing in the summer. He introduced us to some Paralympic sports like wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby. And then one of the mornings, the younger kids went bowling and the older kids got to go shooting. So when I turned 12, I had known Ernie for quite a few years at that point, and turned 12 with my best friend. We got to go to the shooting range together, a little outdoor range up near where the camp was hosted. And I just had so much fun. My best friend and I were on a competitive swim team together, and we just made this morning of shooting a little competition between the two of us. Director of the camp saw how much I enjoyed that and, talked to me a little bit about it after the camp, and that was kind of the end of it for a bit. And then a couple months later, he told me that he was hosting a shooting competition at the American Legion in his area. So it was on my way to wheelchair basketball practice, which I was also involved in, because why not just do every sport that we can think of? And so I trained every Saturday morning for a month and then shot this little shooting competition. And Ernie finally admitted admitted it, but I actually ended up beating him at that little competition that he hosted, which was hilarious because I was just having fun with it. And my name was put on the radar of the National Paralympic coach for shooting at the time. And within a year and a half of trying it for the first time at camp, I was at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs for my first camp. So it was really just by accident, and it has changed the course of my entire life.
That's an awesome accident. That's awesome.
It really was.
Yeah, and learning that within a year too, that's really impressive. It must have been so natural, I guess, for you. I don't know if I could do it naturally or not. It seems super fun, and I do want to try it. And I'm pretty sure after this conversation, I'm going to want to try it even more. But
well, I hope you make it out here one day. I'd love to teach you.
yeah, that would be so much fun. Oh my gosh. I think I realize now, I don't know that a lot of my listeners are going to understand shooting. So can you kind of tell me like the scoring and the rules and stuff that it takes to like be in a shooting competition?
Absolutely. So I'm currently shooting 2 different types of rifles. I'm shooting an air gun and a 22. The 22 in Olympic, Paralympic style shooting, we call small bore. The air gun is a 177 caliber gun. So it's a pellet. Most people will compare it to the size of a BB. Small bore being that 22 is live ammunition. And we shoot that at 50 meters outdoors. So you have like wind conditions that you need to take into account while you're shooting. Air gun is shot at 10 meters indoors. So a lot less like outside factors to take into consideration. Air gun is the target is the size of a silver dollar, with the bullseye being the size of the period in a newspaper. And with what we're doing, a typical match, it'll vary a little bit depending on the event, is 60 shots in approximately an hour. So not only are we scored based on really hitting the bullseye at the level we need to be at, we need to be hitting the bullseye just about 60 out of 60 times. But then because we have electronic scoring, they like to make things just a little bit more interesting. They divide that 0.5 millimeter dot bullseye into tenths of millimeters, and now we're scored on how well we can hit the bullseye. So just barely touching the bullseye with the edge of a pellet would result in a low 10 score, where perfectly covering the bullseye with the pellet would be a 10.9, which is a perfect shot. Small bore, the target is a little bit bigger, about the size of a softball, with the bullseye being about the size of a dime. And again, similar to air gun, we are also scoring in decimal for my events. Will vary. Scoring can vary a little bit depending on the event that you're shooting, but all of mine is done with that decimal scoring. They will add up all 60 shots to get a total score, and you are ranked with all of the other competitors. So the top 8 people who have the best score from that match will move on to a finals round, where it is elimination style shooting, and we shoot on command, if you will. So we shoot 2 series of 5 shots within a certain amount of time. So we're at 10 shots, and then we move into single shots fired on command. We have like a 30-second window. And then they start eliminating the lowest ranked finalist after every 2 single shots. So final, you start over from 0, and high tension, high tension with that elimination. Wow. So.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking of the focus and like, yeah, tension. This is intense. I don't know. I don't know what other words to use about that. I'm also thinking like this, that big, like that's so small. That I know like people listening to the audio can't see my fingers, but like that's tiny. What you're describing.
It is tiny. Most people, you can look at the tip of a pen, and that's about the size of our bullseye.
That's crazy. That's so crazy to think about. I think like when you're watching it, like I feel like I wouldn't think like, oh, you're shooting at that small of a target.
I don't think you really realize how small it is until you actually try it yourself. Because,
right.
We've had some sports or some people, you always give each other, little banter every once in a while, right, with other athletes. And, people talk, shooting isn't a real sport. It's not that hard. And then we bring them out to try it. And they're like, wait, you have to do what? How many times in a row? Ooh, yikes.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a lot of repetition too. Like I would be so excited, to get it once out of 100. I couldn't imagine doing it 5 times in a row. Wow, that's so cool though. That's so cool. Yeah, no, I'm really glad that I had you explain that because I think that helps a lot to put in perspective all of the stuff that you've accomplished within the sport when it is that intense and technical too. Because I don't know, people like I feel like they think shooting and it's like, oh, like hunting. Like there are different things, right? When you think about shooting guns or even like in a range, right? Like you're not shooting at the clay pigeons either. So that's very different. But
Yeah.
yeah, at least growing up in Alabama, that was definitely something that I saw more often than this, I think. But awesome. Well, let's talk about your experience now that we've talked about what you've done or what you do. Um, can you just talk about 2016? I know you were the first American woman to win a Paralympic medal in shooting, which is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Um, how was this? How was this experience for you?
Rio was almost indescribable. I had been involved in some sort of sport, since I was really young. I think I started swimming when I was 8 and always just kind of knew that I wanted to take the sport farther than most people would on a normal basis, especially, going through high school, being a, typical teenage girl wanting to hang out with friends and, go to movies. And, I always just had this, separate part of, not even separate, because all of my high school, teachers and friends were so supportive of what I was doing, but it was just different. It was a different level of commitment than a lot of people were used to at that age. And I moved to the Olympic Training Center a week after I graduated high school to start training towards Rio, since we were only 2 years out at that point. And it just really felt like all the work and all the sacrifices that I had made, through high school, missing out on, typical high school events or family events or vacation or whatever it was, really just all, became worth it, if you will. A lot of people will tell you, a lot of Paralympic athletes can tell you that they really felt like the Paralympic experience like sunk in or became real for them at different points in time. So my, wow, we made it moment, if you will. We had traveled, ridiculous travel to get down to the games, right? Even though it was just in Rio, the USOPC, Olympic and Paralympic Committee, had set up our team processing in Houston. So we flew from Colorado to Houston and immediately went into, classes about decorum and how were to, represent the United States while we were in Rio. We got all of our, team gear. We met with Nike and Ralph Lauren and got all the clothes that we were going to be wearing. And they altered our podium and our opening and closing ceremony uniforms. And then they, you're ushered onto the next flight with all your fellow athletes, some from your team, some from different teams, and you're all sharing the same common goal. And none of us can sleep on the plane because we're too excited to get down there. And then you have to go through, the customs and the process at the Rio airport. And you finally get on a bus and you think that you can relax, but then you get to see the city, and that's so exciting. And you pull into the parking lot behind the Paralympic Village, and you're ushered through the security to get into the village. And for me, walking through the security gates to get into the village and seeing all of the athletes rolling around or walking, and seeing all of the buildings and the cafeteria and just the buzz of excitement, of nervousness was just incredible. And, after all of the excitement I've already had for the last, however many hours to get down there, that's really when it sunk in for me that, that we had all made it, if you will. So I was walking into the village and just seeing everybody was a huge, huge moment for me. And then opening ceremonies, you can't ever can't ever get over the feeling of walking into the stadium for the first time I think it's an experience that you won't ever forget with, an entire stadium chanting for Team USA when we're announced. My parents were actually able to make it down to Rio, so they were in the stands as I walked into the stadium. I had friends from back home texting me, telling me that I had made it on camera, so they were able to see me on TV as I was walking with the rest of Team USA, and that was incredible to have so many people reaching out and be like, wow, you made it, you did it. That was awesome. So
Yeah.
and then on the shooting side of it, getting a little bit more specific into sport, my first match, so I had two matches. In air gun, I shoot, I have two events. So I shoot standing, which is still sitting in my wheelchair, but I don't have my elbows resting on anything. And then prone, where I have a table that attaches to my wheelchair and I get to rest my elbows on it, which, they're trying to mimic the Olympic positions as much as possible. Standing hadn't been going as well as I would have liked leading up to the games. So my coach and I had decided to kind of use my standing match as my practice match, if you will, to really learn how I was going to react, how the atmosphere was going to be, what the competition was like. And, it's not always typical. You always want to go out and medal in every event that you enter in. But we just knew that, absolutely was going to put everything that I had into that match. But if it wasn't the match that, I was medaling in, then that was okay. It was going to be a learning opportunity for my next one, which I think worked out pretty well. So, learned a lot in that standing match. I was actually pretty proud of how I shot under, all the circumstances that had led up to the games. And then going into my prone match just a couple days later, I honestly don't remember a lot of it, which for shooting is actually a good thing. It means that you found your flow state. And it means that everything went really, really well. So I remember getting off the line and my coach, he just hugged me and he's like, what did you think? How did that go? And I'm like, I think it went really well. I don't remember, like normally I can pinpoint, I really struggled with this, or I was having a few issues, working through this issue. And I didn't have that today. And he's like, well, that's good because you made it into the final in third place. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. Yeah. We worked for this. A little bit of nervousness. My parents were, in the stands behind me, freaking out, which was awesome to see. And he asked if I needed anything, and I said, yeah, I need my headphones, because I had so many people from the stands wanting to talk to me. I had so many fellow athletes that I was really good friends with wanting to talk to me, and I'm like, nope, can't do it. It's not the time. Love to talk to everybody as soon as this final's done. But went into that final, had a few nerves at the very beginning. We have a little bit of a sight-in period where we get to make sure our equipment's set up correctly and that the gun is shooting where we want it to. And, I had a few really minor equipment issues we were able to get sorted out. And then we started the final, and I just remember my head was completely clear, had a little bit of a heart rate going on. And the only thought that really stood out to me during that entire final was about halfway through. I think they had eliminated maybe up to sixth place. And there was just one fleeting thought, I'm going to medal today. And then it left. And I'm like, all right, there it was. Let's get back into it. And sure enough, finished out the final pretty well. I lost silver by, I was telling you how big the target was. I lost silver by, 0.2 of a millimeter. But for my first games experience, I was really, really excited and really proud of what I had done. Only to, to turn around and see the team behind me as well, my parents in the stands, handful of coaches that had come down with us. And it was just really, really cool to see all of the work that everybody, that I had done and that everybody else had done to help me get there.
Yeah, that's crazy. I have so many things going through my head right now because like hearing you describe what you were feeling in like each of these different rounds, I don't know how I would feel. Like I'm trying to think, like if I were in that situation, I have no idea what would be going through my head. And you say you didn't remember, but you did a very good job of describing what was happening. Amazing. I'm so excited for you, and I'm so pumped that it went so well. But let's talk about kind of what's coming up here. I guess, how have you been preparing for Tokyo given these restrictions with the last year? And what's that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So going into Rio, one of my coaches came up to me and a fellow teammate, and he looked at us both and he said, "Be prepared for things to go wrong, because they will, and you're not going to be able to control them. The only thing that you can control is how you are going to react to them. Because if you decide to get really worked up, to let it, take over your emotion, it's going to be detrimental to your competition. But if you choose to know that there are things that are going to go wrong, and you choose to acknowledge that you don't know what it is yet, but you're not going to, freak out and, panic over what could come, you're going to have a lot more success." So I think those words of advice, rolling into the 2020 year, really helped a lot. And I think that's only going to continue to help for, Tokyo this summer. Um, it's funny that we're meeting today, because today, a year ago, was the last training session that I had before the training center shut down for 5 months. And with shooting, we electronic targets, very specialized. There weren't any places that I could train really here in Colorado with all of their COVID restrictions and all of the shutdowns that were occurring. So I chose to take a break. I did bring all of my gear home when we got the word that the training center was going to shut down. Brought it home so I could dry fire, do mental exercises if I wanted to. But if we're being completely honest, I chose not to, because after Rio, I only took a very short period of time off. I think it was less than 3 months. And when everything shut down, I really felt like all of my training was going really well. We were about to enter into our World Cup season. We were a week out from going to our first World Cup when they canceled. So it was a forced break, but I decided to take a break through all of it. Some people, chose to train really hard through all of it, but I also got married about 5 months before COVID hit. So, I was in a house with my husband. We have a dog and a cat. We had and have people living with us on and off as needed. And life was pretty crazy. So to sit down for a minute and just get to breathe, I think was huge. I think that was really important, because as athletes, I think we often can forget to do that, especially when we get wrapped up in the middle of a competition season. But it was really hard. It was really hard to have everything shut down so suddenly, and to not get to shoot. It was something that had been a part of my daily life, pretty much my daily life for, since I started in middle of high school. And the break was good. I think it was really worth it. I came back in September a little bit stronger than I was before, and got to work through some different issues that I don't think would have shown themselves with enough time to correct them before the games, had they not been postponed. So I think all of, the Rio experience through, 2020 has just shown me that change doesn't have to be a bad thing, and that we can choose how we react to situations that arise. So I'm hoping that going into Tokyo, I'll be prepared for, whatever goes wrong or goes right while we're there.
Definitely. You said you got to breathe. I think I've heard a lot of people saying that whether they wanted to or not, they did have that breather within the last year. breathe, balance, everybody's new favorite words, I think.
What?
Yeah. But that's great. Like, I think that it's needed to, especially like starting the new chapter in your life and stuff. I feel like that was probably really good and bad timing, bad worldwide, good for your situation and where you were at the time. I think that you probably benefited from it, which is great. Yeah, well, you kind of led into this, so let's keep going here. What does the road to Tokyo mean to you? I know I'm super pumped. Hopefully everything goes to plan. But I mentioned this before we started too. Like the road to Tokyo to me, or the road to wherever we're going every 2 or 4 years. um, it's like the excitement, right? Everybody's so pumped about the games that are coming up. It's the cool commercials and the stuff on Twitter, and like everybody's super excited. But I feel like that's probably not what you think about when you hear the road to Tokyo or the road to somewhere else. So, what does this road mean to you?
I think that the road to Tokyo is unique. This quad, it's really really unique. Never in history have we had a quad mean 5 years instead of 4. There's only been 3 Olympics in history that have ever been canceled, and it was due to world wars. So the road to Tokyo this year, instead of last year, I think is a chance for a comeback. I think it's a chance for all of us to really, take that breath, to find that balance, and to figure out what is important to all of us. And if it isn't sport, it was the opportunity for us to figure out what that was. And the road to Tokyo, it's more than just me. It's the coaches that I have behind me. It's my family, my friends, and really the entire country. Rooting, for Team USA as a collective. And I think it's going to be a huge opportunity for the world to find some joy in, in this summer, to, watch athletes from hopefully every country get to come together and do what they love. So I think it could be a huge moment of joy for the entire world as we move into the Olympics and Paralympics.
For sure, for sure. I'm looking forward to it. I want that joy. I want the excitement. Can't wait. Can't wait. I feel like McKenna, you're reading my mind because you keep on like edging into the next question. This is great. This is awesome. So you mentioned the friends and family, everybody who's cheering you on, your coaches and things like that. But I guess who are some of the most influential people that have helped you like on this journey so far?
That question is so hard because I feel like we would sit here forever if I went through and named absolutely every person that has been a part of this journey. To start it off, I wouldn't be here without Ernie, the guy who started Camp Access. I wouldn't be here without both of my parents and my grandparents who helped purchase my first rifle and some of the equipment that I needed to get started. I actually met my husband the first time that I ever came to the training center. So I wouldn't be where I am today without the sport. And I wouldn't be in the sport to this degree without his help. I've had a number of coaches that I've worked with, over the years. And a big name that's standing out right now too is Roger Withrow. He was the first Paralympic shooting medal back in 1980, and he was our first and only gold. So I feel like he really, helped the whole program get started, and there's the reason that we're here. The team behind the team, as they always call it, at the training center, all of our dietitians, our sports psychologists, strength coaches, it's just everybody. That's the biggest thing that, all of us athletes, I hope, learn at some point, is that it's not just us. It's the team and the staff and the family and the country that gets us where we are.
Definitely. They call this the Olympic and Paralympic movement for a reason, right? It's a movement. It's not just a game or, some kind of one-off event. It is a movement, and there's so many people involved. But that's amazing. I know these people have helped you a lot, and you've done so many cool things with their push, kind of their guidance, which is awesome. But just a couple more for you here. I guess what are your goals, kind of future plans? Obviously Tokyo is a future plan, hopefully, but I guess what's coming up for you?
I think the best part about being a shooting athlete is how long your career can be. When I went to Rio, there was an Australian athlete who retired after her 12th consecutive Paralympic Games. And it's not like she was just participating, in Rio. She was competitive. And I think it's really good to see that I'm not necessarily going to lose my qualification time because I'm getting older, if you will. So, I don't know if I will go for Paris. My husband and I do want to start a family, so that, is kind of on the radar within the next couple of years. And maybe come back for LA. I think it would be super exciting to, get to compete at a games here in the US. But I think really, really long term is that I just want to make a difference in the lives of other people with disabilities. My life was changed because of one guy who started a summer camp. And I've seen, the sport grow since I brought my medal home from Rio. And I hope that other, especially kids, I hope other kids' lives are changed because of something that I got to share with them.
For sure. And I'm so excited that I get to share this story. I hope somebody listens and is motivated and they want to go start or get involved or meet you or something.
I hope they reach out.
I hope this triggers the domino effect and they'll come find you and it'll work. But amazing. Awesome. I'm so pumped. Last question for you. I end all of my shows on advice. So what is one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's looking to start shooting?
If you've never tried it before, reach out to a local club. If you go to USA Shooting's website, we have an area where we've actually pinpointed some clubs in every state that you can reach out to. If there isn't one super close by on USA Shooting's website, see what's local, because the best thing that you can do is to just try it. We joke a little bit on the Paralympic side that when you're first getting started, we literally go dumpster diving to find equipment that's going to work, just to get your foot in the door so that you can just have fun with it for the first time. We actually make, it can be really expensive to get custom made tables for wheelchairs or to purchase your first rifle or pistol. And we actually made tables out of walkers. We buy walkers from the thrift store and we put a piece of plywood on top of them so that you can either sit in your wheelchair or sit in a folding chair and just try it. So biggest piece of advice is to just go out and try it.
That's awesome. That's really good advice too. I think I was hearing that a different way. I was hearing go to a local club so you don't just try it yourself and you don't know what you're doing. But maybe that's also important. I don't know.
I was going to say it absolutely can be, get some advice from local coaches. I mean, at the same time too, if you don't have the resources, reach out to somebody, talk to them. And if if that's your option, try it on your own.
For sure. Awesome advice. I hope somebody listening to this goes out and tries it. But McKenna, thank you so much for your time and thank you for sharing your story. This has been awesome. And I'm super excited to put it out there.
Yeah, it's been so great to talk to you today. Thank you so much for reaching out and having me on.
Of course. McKenna, thank you so much for sharing your story in our road to Tokyo. Tune in on Wednesday morning to hear from Joe Delagrave. He's the team captain of USA Wheelchair Rugby.